something I really struggled with as a young gardener was my fear of letting go, right? Like I didn't want to see things die. But when I realized that I need to do that for me because I need my own rest period. Like when things, sleep for the winter or whatever, I need that rest period too and that time to recharge. When I started to realize that and recognize that as my own integral part of healing with the garden in its seasonality, then I've been able to kind of like, help myself in that way.
Hello, welcome back to the Evergreen RX. I'm Hayden, licensed mental health therapist, Cancer Moon, and the first to get deep at any party. And today we are joined by Gardening with Desiree Lindsley. Lindsley?
Yes.
With Desiree Lindsley. And if for anybody watching or just even listening, you might be hearing some birds chirping, wind blowing, because we are actually in the Gardening with Des garden, which is so exciting. You guys can see a little bit in the background. I can see the beautiful view of everything else. So I'm super excited to have Des here today. She is a TikTok gardener, educational kind of influencer in the gardening space, also a hairdresser by day. When the pandemic happened, she had time off of work, 3-4 months off work, to really get into the gardening space and started posting her videos online to teach people all about what she does, everything she knows. She's also a Texas master gardener, and her backyard is a certified wildlife habitat, which is pretty amazing. And she has chickens, vegetables, flowers, everything you can think of. The squirrels are basically her best friend. And yeah, she's just such a cool person in the gardening space, really passionate about how gardens have the power to heal. And we're kind of here just to talk about gardening and mental health, obviously, but more specifically about slowing down, connecting to nature, connecting to your environment, seasonal shifts, and some of the things that you can learn through getting offline, being outside, and getting really present. So I'm super excited.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so to kind of start off, I just want to touch on how romanticized slow living is online. And gardening can be a big part of that. Just being in nature in general is super romanticized.
Yeah.
And so I kind of wonder, what are some of the realities and challenges that you've encountered having a garden, kind of amidst the backdrop of things being really glorified in that space?
So honestly, I do think you're right that in social media, the portrayal of gardening can be all the highlights. It can be all the things that are beautiful and amazing and aesthetic about gardening, and none of the hard work and effort that goes into it. And for me, something that I'm always trying to do is kind of share my garden, but not only lean on how pretty it is, but really also teach people the way they can have this in their own backyard and show some of the hard work that goes into it, because it's not always easy. Some years I'm filled with pests and I don't get very many vegetables. I don't have those big harvest baskets. And other years I'm abundant in so many different things in the garden. But a big challenge is living in Texas and our weather being so hot and extreme that, for a couple of years, we haven't really had much in the garden. So it's very challenging. Like, it's beautiful, but sometimes it's brutal,
Yeah. Kind of like what you said of like, it's beautiful and it's brutal, because it's like, I mean, we can take that symbolically as far as we want for just like life in general and anything somebody is trying to do, especially in the creative, more like right-brained region. Like, gardening is like a science in a lot of ways.
It sure is.
I know I don't have to tell you that, because there's so much you have to planning and plotting and building and all of that, but it's also you have to be so flexible and adaptable.
Yep.
And I think that is part of what we don't see so much online.
Yeah.
In this kind of beautiful, very aesthetic portrayal of things like
Yeah.
gardening, because you don't see how, even how many tries it takes to get the like beautiful shot that you're
Yep.
posting online,
Yes.
you know?
Well, with gardening, you always have to improvise, adapt, and overcome. That's my biggest thing,
Mm.
So, like, you may have the best laid plan for like a gorgeous flowering plant, but you may realize through planting it that you put it in the wrong spot and so it
Mm.
didn't thrive. So then you may go through some grief stages of, oh crap, I bought this plant and then I planted it and then it didn't live. And a lot of people give up at that point because they're so challenged when that happens that they they get so emotional. They're like, oh gosh, I can't do this, I'm not good at it.
Yeah.
So through these challenges, it kind of teaches you to be more resilient. Gardening
Mm.
teaches you resilience
Mm-hmm.
and also about the seasonality of things. You're right.
Yeah, I love the resiliency piece because I think that's, part of the inspiration on anybody listening that maybe like wants to garden, but also some of you guys that are listening just because, I don't know, you're a fan of the podcast or it just kind of sounds interesting. I think that there's so much more that you can like extrapolate out
Mm-hmm.
from this as like a hobby or a lifestyle or even, work for some
Yeah.
people. Your garden is like a whole job.
Yeah.
But even somebody that might just have like a little herb garden or has some other passion and hobby they want to spend time on,
Yep.
I think the resiliency piece is like the through line through all of that
It is.
because I practice piano and yeah, resiliency is important with that. I think there's so much with the process and enjoying, each step along the way. And that's one thing, particularly with gardening, because everything dies. Like things
Mm-hmm.
do die, or some things come back, but some things they grow for a little bit, they die, and then they move on, and you have to start over.
Yeah.
And that can be really challenging because I think right now we're not focused so much on just the lifelong process of the things we're doing. It's really very focused on the outcome and the final product.
Yes. That's true.
Oh, I think that a lot of times what makes gardening so glorified is people, myself included, are really wanting to reconnect to their environment
Mm-hmm.
and slow down and get off their phones. And I wonder how you were able to start to do that and make space for that in your life.
I was already doing it. That's one thing. I was already doing it and I'm always still doing it. I
Mm.
don't film everything that I do out in the garden. My main goal has always been my personal connection with nature. Being barefoot outside, interacting with caterpillars or the wildlife in the garden, seeing the regular hummingbirds that visit or the lizards that are always in the same spots. That is what draws me out and keeps me off my phone in a lot of ways.
Mm.
But then I realized that I have this magical thing going on and that it is possible for others to have that magical thing. And what I really want is for more people to be able to experience being outside and being with nature because right now especially like everybody's on their phone,
Yeah.
everybody's in front of the computer, everybody's watching something on TV.
I was curious, kind of toggling between, I think, just coming from like the mental health side of things, I know that it can be really hard for us to touch in with something addictive and then touch out of it, because
Yep.
it's like the whole point is it's addictive. So it's really hard to find balance with it.
Yeah.
So I wonder how you do balance. It sounds like, I mean, it comes kind of naturally to you, but toggling between being engaged online and responding to people and posting and then being out on your own and kind of in a quiet, more connected space.
The truth, the honestly, the real truth too is that I don't always win that battle,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes like there is a little bit of anxiety wrapped up in I'm visible on the internet and I am posting these things online and I'm putting myself out there. And then just the ego wants to babysit sometimes.
Mm.
And I have to remind myself that you know, I've put it out there, and it's okay that I've put it out, and I don't need to babysit it. And a lot of times you won't always get like the most kind comments, but somebody said one time the comments aren't for you,
Mm.
and realizing that just taking that time, that step away, and taking a break from social media when you need it, that is so important. You have to.
Yeah.
So,
I've been so surprised through doing this podcast, and I think this like season in particular, of how much I find myself talking about social media and the internet. Like each time I'm like, I kind of have this thought in the back of my head where it's like, oh, am I talking about this too much? Like, do people not want to hear? But I honestly think it's so integral, and maybe there's like a part of me that understands also for the demographic that I'm talking to. Like, well, actually, I want to pause there because I think that people of all ages are really addicted. I
yeah.
think it gets put on young people a lot, but I actually do. I see people any age that have a hard time getting off of their phone.
Yeah.
But I find that it just keeps coming back to this, like thinking like sitting out in this space, this garden that you have and that you've cultivated that clearly is so much work and such a labor of love and intention and time
Mm-hmm.
that it's hard to not talk about kind of the awe that I have with being able to do something like this in the distinct period of time we're living in
Yeah.
where the internet and social media is so prevalent, because it's just, yeah, maybe 20, 30 years ago, like seeing a garden would be like, yeah, this is your hobby. What else are you supposed to do after work? Like,
Yeah.
but now it feels like, oh, so you have to spend all this time where you're not watching TV and you're not,
Mm-hmm.
online, and
Yeah.
you're just out here by yourself, like
Mm-hmm.
doing this for yourself.
Yeah.
And yeah, you do post things, but you're not doing it for public consumption. That's not where your heart has come from with
Yeah.
it. And I just think that's getting more and more kind of rare or like impressive when you see it.
Well, thank you. But my whole goal is to get more people to remember that we need to do this.
Yeah.
Like if I think about my generation growing up, we still took classes for cursive and things like that. People don't
Uh-huh.
do that
Yeah.
anymore. You don't need to do a lot of handwriting. Everything is so darn digital. And the thing is that we can't neglect our responsibility for stewardship, even in a backyard setting like this.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing this kind of brings up for me is just how scary the world kind of is these days, and how, back to your point about being addicted to phones, like I don't need to babysit the news either. I don't need to
Mm.
babysit my social media, and I don't need to babysit the news.
Uh-huh.
And when things sometimes feel so hopeless in the world, the garden is where I go for my sanctuary to heal and to get my mind off of that stuff, and to know that in my one little spot, I'm actually making a positive impact on my local environment.
Yeah.
And that's
Mm-hmm.
huge for me. It's my why every day.
I want to hear more, like, because I know that nature, gardening, things like that in general are always talked about as being really therapeutic.
Yeah.
So, like, how has it been? You've touched on it a little, but if you have more to say about how it's been healing for you.
Yeah, so I don't broadcast this online a lot, but I don't mind talking about it ever.
Mm-hmm.
I have, for most of my entire life, struggled with anxiety and depression, really. And sometimes, like, those things overwhelm me so much that I almost feel incapacitated. But having the garden always, always heals me, because I know that no matter what's going on, that I can come out here and I can interact with nature, and I can kind of boil some things down to these small moments where I might be going through something really big, but when I walk outside and I see a butterfly lay an egg on a plant and then turn into a caterpillar and then go off and be a cocoon and then emerge as a butterfly in my backyard, I realize that no matter what's going on with me or how I'm feeling, that life is going to continue to go on, and there is still good to see and interact with.
Mm-hmm.
And this also, something I really struggled with as a young gardener was my fear of letting go, right?
Mm.
Like I didn't want to see things die, but when I realized that I need to do that for me because I need my own rest period. Like when things, sleep for the winter or whatever, I need
Yeah.
that rest period too and that time to recharge. When I started to realize that and recognize that as my own integral part of healing with the garden in its
Mm.
seasonality, then I've been
Mm-hmm.
able to kind of like, you know, help myself in that way.
Yeah. Oh.
And honestly, when you do good, you feel good. And if I'm doing good in the backyard, that's making me feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And when I share that with others and then I get that feedback from them that it's also helping them do good and feel good, you can only continue. It can only be a net positive from there. So,
Yeah, I feel like you can break it down to just like the fundamentals of kind of that law of nature, basically, of the universe, of like, yeah, when you do something that makes you feel productive, makes you feel accomplished, and makes you feel good, that it will kind of compound on itself. Like there,
yeah.
we do have the autonomy to get out and do something even just so small. A lot of people I know now have like house plants and stuff like that. Even just like caring for and watering or going and doing some like pruning on your house plants. Like
Mm-hmm.
that can be a really small thing if all you feel like you can do is put down your phone for like a couple minutes, or to kind
Yeah.
of get out of whatever funk that you're in just for a couple minutes and go take care of something else.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is so powerful, and I love what you say about letting go, because yeah, I mean, who doesn't struggle with letting go? But I
Yeah.
think some of us more than others, and I really relate to you on that. Like it is hard to watch things change and to just know that is so much of what life is. It's a really hard lesson to learn.
Yeah.
And I think seeing the shifts in the seasons,
Mm-hmm.
connecting with that, in the past couple of years, I've really started to celebrate like seasonal holidays, things like
Yeah.
the equinoxes and the solstices. And
Yes.
I love it because it helps me actually stop and notice
Mm-hmm.
what is going on around me
Mm-hmm.
and be like, oh yeah, why am I feeling more tired and maybe more like just kind of routine and doing the same thing? Well, because it's cold outside and the
Yeah.
trees are, hibernating, and all
Yeah.
of the plants and animals, you don't see as many birds. You don't, it's like we are still being affected by that, whether or not we're consciously noticing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wonder, like, with the seasonal changes and the ebbs and flows that you notice and you're so tuned into by being outside so often, what are some of the things that you've maybe taken from that you apply to your day-to-day life or your job, as a hairdresser outside of the garden? Like, if there's ways that you kind of take what's going on around you and apply it to how you treat yourself and how you live your life.
Yeah, sure. This time of year I don't work as much behind the chair. In the
Mm-hmm.
winter, though, when I can't be outside anyway, and I'm really craving those human interactions, then I may work more, and try to be present behind the chair more, but rest more where the garden is concerned. Like I
Yeah.
don't
Mm-hmm.
concern myself with coming out here and cutting away dead, old growth. I don't concern myself with, unless I have a new building project, with turning soil, fertilizing soil or anything like that. I try to winterize my garden, and then if I put things like lettuces or something out into the vegetable garden, I just let them do their thing. But I know that the plants, even though you cannot see, this is so amazing. Even though you see a plant and you think, oh, that thing is, the winter killed it,
Mm-hmm.
it's no longer here. Most of them are doing work you cannot even see underneath the soil. They are putting in stronger roots. They are digging deeper into the ground with their tap roots to seek more water, to be a bigger plant next year. So they're conserving their energy to put it down into their roots, which is really a great analogy for life when you think about it. Like, we can't all be a beautiful flower. Sometimes we have to be in the dirt with the roots, like growing, putting in our foundation for something, so then we can come back and be stronger.
Yeah.
And so in that way, I think that gardening kind of teaches you how to recognize your own personal renaissances,
Mm-hmm.
and be more fully present with them and see how those things kind of mesh together in life and in the garden.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes, yeah. I love that because, yeah, the more we start to kind of use seasonality and kind of like the wheel of the year as like this symbolism for ourselves,
mm-hmm.
it starts to become a lot more apparent, the adaptability that we have in our own life.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we think about productivity or like doing anything as like a passion or a job, it
Mm-hmm.
seems like it has to be very static.
Yeah.
Like I have started this thing and now I'm going to do it every day for the rest of my
No.
life the same way, and it's never going to change. Like,
Yeah.
that is just, it's kind of like the rhetoric that we get around this. Like that's like what it feels like you should be doing, or it
Mm-hmm.
looks like people are doing,
Yeah.
or people are posting their content from 6 months ago during, you never
Yeah.
really know. And so when you really can kind of like remove yourself from that for a minute, and even people like, I mean, it's fun because we kind of relate on the fact of like really client facing work.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you get paid when you're actually there with someone, and you have to be inside of that space, and there's not,
Yep.
it's just very restricted in that way,
Yeah.
that like a lot of people with, regular 9 to 5s or with their certain jobs that are consistent through the year, and the day to day in your work looks really similar, to see what other ways you can make changes around that. Like,
Yeah.
what your morning routine is, or what you do after, the end of a day. Because I'm sure when it's spring and the vibes are like
Yeah.
up, and everybody's kind of
Yeah.
like, oh, yeah, okay, that maybe after like, working all day, you might come home and be like, I'm kind of ready to go out into the garden
Oh, yeah.
and get all this stuff done, because you're feeling it. You're actually like
Mm-hmm.
in tune with what sounds good to you.
Yep.
Versus other times when we start to think, I should do that, I need to do this, like, or I was working so much in the garden last month, like what's happening now? And it's like, well, it's not the same time of life anymore. Like,
Mm-mm.
and you're not in the same place. You might have other things going on in your life.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really powerful when we start to disconnect from the idea that things have to be so consistent to be, I don't know, for us to be successful or us to be doing something meaningful.
Yeah. You know what? One of my least favorite words is should.
Yeah.
When you start shoulding all over yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you really start to affect your own personal mental health, really. Because if you're not, one thing you have to do in gardening is meet yourself where you're at, period. And you need to do that in life too. And as I've grown up, I've learned that when I learn to meet myself where I'm at and understand that I'm not going to have the same energy every day, and that things in life may pull me in a different direction, but this is always here when I need it or when I'm able to come back to it,
Mm.
then I really started to be able to not give myself a hard time for something not being successful out here as well. And back to your point of like having everybody, like you work all day, you have this 9 to 5 job, and then how do you find time for the other things? Well, it's rare that somebody's not multi-passionate.
Uh-huh.
All of us are multi-passionate,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of us aren't doing the thing we want to do all day. We're working to be able to do the thing we're passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
So our job is funding our passion in a lot of ways.
Mm.
So, you know, I don't ever want people to box themselves into the idea that I don't have time for something. No, you have the time that you are able to make, and sometimes you're not as able to make as much time as you would like. But that doesn't mean give up.
Yeah.
Improvise, adapt, overcome, adjust, like push forward. If you want it, it'll be there.
Yeah.
Like no garden exists without the gardener's effort, ever. So
Yeah.
if I didn't put in the time, if I didn't put in the effort, if I didn't stick to it, if I didn't overcome my failures, if I didn't, forgive myself when I did something wrong or when I felt like I had a failure, and then learn from that,
Mm-hmm.
then I couldn't have any of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's with anything we try to do, whether it's pottery, whether it's, beaded jewelry, or if it's starting a podcast or being a gardener, putting yourself out there on the internet for whatever your niche is. Even if a million people are doing your one thing, nobody's doing your one thing the way you're doing your thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's about showing up for yourself at the
Yeah.
end of the day.
I love that. That's exactly true. And something you were saying was making me think of, I read this one book called 4,000 Weeks. And one of the things he talks about, I think he's citing like another study that I can't remember right now, but it talks about like when people are trying to like, say like a grad student that has to write like a dissertation, that seems like such an overwhelming prospect. Like that is the culmination of your sometimes 7-year education.
Yeah.
And he said that the students that would commit, even just like 15 minutes a day to it were a lot more happy throughout the process than the ones that kind of did like these long, really like dreadful bursts of work, which is how I used to always work in school. If I had to write an essay, I'd sit down and write the whole thing in one day. And then I would be nervous and like hate every time I had an essay to do because I had built up in my mind that it's this huge, start to finish, like accomplishment oriented thing versus, giving a little bit of time each day. And some days, like maybe the 15 minutes you spend, you actually don't really get anything done and you just kind of sit there and like stare at the wall, and then other days it's super productive. But like really being able to put in what you feel like you can commit and then stop.
Yeah.
And take a break and walk away.
It's hard to learn that though. Everybody's always still trying to learn that, I think. And I am.
Yeah.
Like there are times when I'm just so overwhelmed by all the things that I'm doing because I am so passionate about all the things. I love people. I love touching people and holding space with people and doing their hair. But that does take something, like we have a give and we have a take, and the garden has a give and a take. And sometimes it has a give and a give. And when those things have a give and a give, that's where the magic happens, I think.
I love that. So I'm curious, just to kind of bring it to the connection that we have with ourselves and our own body. I think that gardening and just nature in general is what I always think of when I really think of grounding practices, swimming in the water, on a walk. It can be so grounding, connecting to our senses. And obviously with your work, the sensory stimuli is so strong. There's every part of you is having some kind of interaction with the garden. And I wonder how that's helped with your own awareness and your connection to your body.
It's helped so much, honestly. I will more often than not set my phone aside just to be quiet and close my eyes and listen to the sounds around me. I do have squirrels that come and ask me for peanuts. I will always put my phone down for them. I'll see a hummingbird fly through and I'm immediately off my phone and in that moment and thinking about how lucky I am to be in that space. Touching the earth, like just having my hands in the soil, like it's such a rewarding and beautiful thing to do. And it kind of gives you that childlike wonder sometimes, thinking about making mud pies in your parents' backyard or, whatever. And if you didn't get to do that as a kid, I'm so sorry. Go outside and make a mud pie. I mean, it's so much fun, or just like sometimes when I'm really like just struggling, going outside and running my hands through some oregano or some mint, kind of just reminds me to take a breath and to feel my breath, and being able to do that and go outside in my own space, where it feels so safe for me.
Yeah.
Is huge. That's huge. So there's a myriad of ways that I feel like I'm always grounding and connecting out here. Sometimes it's just bare feet on grass.
Yeah. It's so cool hearing you talk about it too, because, knowing kind of more of like the science behind things like breathing and how we can breathe to really help calm anxiety, and like the impacts of, the nutrients that are in soil that then gets through your skin. Like I know some of those, like kind of the research they've done that just solidifies what people already know, that so naturally occurs when you're out in nature. Like, yeah, you see something beautiful, a beautiful flower or an herb, and you just stop to smell it. And you're breathing deeper, naturally doing that. And that has all these positive impacts. So it's such a cool thing that just happens when we're outside. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have to think about, okay, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to do my deep breathing. It's like there's just certain things that trigger that in us. And,
Yeah.
I was on a walk the other day and it was like a really amazing walk. I love walking. And towards the end, I started thinking about something I had at work the next day and I started feeling really anxious. And I was like, oh, shit. Like, I was really enjoying this walk and now I feel like it's ruined and I'm anxious. And I was passing by like a wisteria vine,
Mm-hmm.
and I love wisteria so much, and I just have to stop and smell it when I see it.
Yeah.
Even though I was anxious, I was like, I'm gonna stop and smell this flower. And when I did, instantly I was like, I just wasn't anxious anymore.
Totally.
And I was like so stunned. I know that. I teach that to people, whatever, but I wasn't thinking about it in that moment. I just like saw this beautiful flower. I just had to smell it. And then it had this amazing impact
Mm-hmm.
on me getting so lost in my mind right before that and being so in the future and predicting all these, horrible feelings that I thought I was going to have, that as soon as I just dropped down and was so present, because you have to be to smell what this flower smells like,
Yeah.
it just completely put me back in my body. And it's amazing. It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
a crazy thing that we have access to.
It is crazy. And it's wonderful and we forget it.
Mm-hmm.
People forget it. You know, talking about this, not everybody has the space to go outside and do this. They don't have a backyard. I didn't have a backyard, but I was always hungry for this, and I balcony gardened everywhere. You can
Yeah.
grow flowers in pots on your balcony. You can feed hummingbirds from your balcony and wild birds. You can do these things. And also, we live in beautiful Austin, and when the weather's nice, we have so many places to walk and go out and feel these things and to stop and smell a rose or smell the
Mm-hmm.
flowers. There's a reason why we're encouraged to do those things. And I think that it's so important that we talk about that more. Having
Yeah.
a sensory experience out in nature can be rare these days, but there are ways to do it, even if you don't have a big backyard.
Yeah. I even think about, like, most places people live will have, some kind of public garden spaces and um, parks and things like that. And even if it feels like, the idea of having your own kind of garden or even flowers, taking care of things like that, if that feels too far out, if it feels too far out to even imagine going and just sitting and listening to the birds for a little bit, if you're gonna be on your phone or you're gonna do something anyway, like, just go to a park and try it. Like, just be
Yeah.
sitting out on your porch or your balcony, or open up a window. Like, even just the smallest little thing, I think, it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
So I wonder, for anybody that is listening that's just wanting to slow down and deepen their connection with nature, and through that with their body, and kind of learn about themselves through this connection, do you have any other last lessons or advice or things that you want to share?
Sure. If you're looking to get more out in nature or get more inspired by nature and really lean into it, but you may not have an idea of where to start by like checking out your local extension office. We have plenty of free resources there for anybody. Or think about an experienced gardener or person that likes to be outside in your life that you can lean on their advice or
Hmm.
their suggestions for going and doing something. Um, and always just stay hungry for knowledge and know that like Rome wasn't built in a day. Like you are always working towards your next thing. Like keep
Hmm.
pushing forward and don't let like the little setbacks become big mountains to climb.
Hmm.
Understand that those little things are part of the big thing. And just go outside and make an observation. Even if it's walking around the block and you have a neighbor and they have a really pretty yard and they're outside in their yard and you say to yourself, oh, I feel weird. I don't want to talk to them. Ask them about their garden. Please do it because they want to talk about it,
Yeah.
especially if it's in the front yard. If it's out there, they want you to see it. They want you to talk about it. They want to answer questions most of the time. Just don't be afraid to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Ask and you shall receive. The universe will always give, I think.
Uh-huh.
So,
I agree with you.
yeah.
Yeah. So where can people find you? What do you want people to know? I'll have it all linked below, but
You can find me anywhere that social media exists. I'm on Facebook,
okay.
Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. My main following is on TikTok. It's Gardening with Dez with two Z's or one Z, depending on the platform, but Gardening with Dez. And yeah, I'll be there. I'm going to be talking about pollinators and ways to get outside, ways to protect the environment and do things responsibly, but also about how to grow food and flowers and have chickens and be supportive.
Yeah, I love it. All right, great. It was so nice to talk to you.
Thank you. It was wonderful
Thanks for
talking to
coming
you.
on.
Yeah, it was a
All right.
blast.
Bye, guys.
Bye.